What happens when a 17-year-old girl who has spent 3 years fighting in interstellar war against humanity's greatest enemies suddenly finds herself sitting in a high school chemistry class? What occurs when someone who has commanded battleships and made life-or-death decisions for entire star systems is told she needs a hall pass to use the bathroom? This is the story of Maya Chen, the youngest tactical prodigy in human military history, who earned the nickname the Ghost of Kepler Station after single-handedly orchestrating the defense that saved 12 million civilians. She's someone who learned to sleep through artillery bombardments, who can field strip a plasma rifle blindfolded, and who carries scars from battles fought in the void between stars. But now the war is over. Humanity won, barely, and Maya is expected to do something she's never done before: be a normal teenager. The government says she needs education. Her therapists say she needs social integration. Her parents, who she hasn't seen in 4 years, say she needs to catch up on what she missed. What they don't understand is that Maya didn't miss her childhood. She spent it saving the human race. Now she must face her greatest challenge yet, navigating the brutal social hierarchies of Jefferson High School, where her fellow students see her as either a freak or a fraud, where teachers treat her like a problem to be solved, and where the cafeteria feels more dangerous than any battlefield she's ever known. This is a story about what happens when the tools that make you a hero in war make you an outcast in peace. It's about finding your place in a world that no longer needs you to save it, but desperately needs you to heal within it. Most of all, it's about discovering that sometimes the hardest battle isn't against alien invaders, it's against the assumption that being human means being normal. Welcome to Maya's War for Belonging. The alarm clock screamed at 0600 hours, just like every morning for the past 4 years. Maya Chen's eyes snapped open, her hand instinctively reaching for the plasma pistol that should have been on her nightstand. Instead, her fingers closed around empty air and the soft fabric of civilian bedsheets. She lay still for 30 seconds, listening. No incoming fire. No emergency klaxons. No reports streaming through her neural interface about enemy positions or casualty counts. Just the gentle hum of suburban life filtering through windows that weren't reinforced against vacuum breach. Maya sat up slowly, her movements precise and economical. Muscle memory from years of operating in zero-G had trained her to never waste motion, never make unnecessary noise. Her bare feet hit the carpet, actual carpet, not the cold metal decking she'd grown accustomed to, and she padded to the window. Outside, Jefferson High School loomed like a fortress made of red brick and teenage angst. Students were already gathering in clusters on the front lawn, their voices carrying across the distance in a cacophony that made her temples throb. After years of ship's communication protocols and tactical silence, the casual chaos of civilian conversation felt like sensory assault. "Maya? Sweetheart, are you awake?" Her mother's voice drifted up from downstairs, tentative and careful. Everything about her parents had been tentative and careful since she'd returned. They spoke to her like she might shatter if they raised their voices above a whisper. "I'm up, Mom," Maya called back, her voice automatically dropping into the measured tones she'd learned as a ship's captain. Clear. Confident. Betraying nothing of the storm inside. She moved through her morning routine with military precision. Shower in 4 minutes flat. Teeth brushed in exactly 90 seconds. Hair pulled back in a regulation bun that would meet fleet standards, even though fleet standards no longer applied to her life. The clothes were the hardest part. Jeans. A sweater. Sneakers. Fabric that served no tactical purpose, offered no protection, made no statement except "I am a normal 17-year-old girl." Maya stared at her reflection and saw a lie. The girl in the mirror had the lean build of someone who'd spent years in variable gravity. Her hands bore the faint scars of plasma burns and metal cuts. Her eyes held the 1,000-yard stare that her therapist, Dr. Martinez, kept trying to help her soften. But most telling was the way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders squared, ready to respond to threats that no longer existed. "You look beautiful, honey." Her mother appeared in the doorway, holding a plate of eggs that had gone cold while waiting for Maya to come downstairs. Rebecca Chen's smile was bright and brittle, the same expression she'd worn throughout the war whenever the news mentioned battles in the Kepler system. "Are you excited about your first day?" "Excited." Maya turned the word over in her mind like a tactical concept she couldn't quite grasp. When was the last time she'd felt excited? Maybe when they'd received word that the alien siege of New Geneva had been broken. Or when the prototype fighters she'd helped design had successfully penetrated enemy shields at the Battle of Procyon. "I'm prepared," Maya said instead, which was as close to excited as she could manage. Her father, David, looked up from his tablet as they entered the kitchen. He'd been reading the news again, she could tell by the worried crease between his eyebrows. The war might be over, but the aftermath kept generating headlines. Reconstruction efforts. Veteran affairs. Political debates about military spending now that humanity's survival was no longer in question. "Remember," he said, setting the tablet aside with the same care he might use to disarm an explosive, "you don't have to tell anyone about your service. You can just be a normal student." Normal student. Another concept that felt foreign. Maya had missed 4 years of high school while commanding starships and coordinating planetary defenses. While her peers had been worrying about prom dates and college applications, she'd been calculating firing solutions and managing casualty reports. The government tutors had assured her parents that Maya was academically ready for senior year. Her tactical training had included advanced mathematics, physics, xenobiology, and strategic analysis that far exceeded what most universities taught. But academic readiness and social readiness were different species of challenge. Maya ate her breakfast in silence, tasting nothing. Food had been functional for so long, military rations designed for maximum nutrition and minimum preparation time, that the concept of flavor for pleasure felt almost decadent. "I could drive you," her mother offered, the words tumbling out too quickly. "On your first day. Just to make sure you find everything okay." The offer was kind. It was also terrifying in its implications. Maya had navigated through asteroid fields and hostile space. She'd memorized the layout of Jefferson High from the school website in approximately 6 minutes. The idea that she might need help finding a classroom felt like questioning her competence. "I'll walk," Maya said. "It's only 12 minutes at standard pace." Her parents exchanged one of their looks, those wordless communications that couples developed over years of marriage. Maya recognized tactical hand signals, ship-to-ship light codes, and 17 different alien gesture languages. But her parents' silent conversations remained a mystery. The walk to school took exactly 11 minutes and 43 seconds, accounting for 3 traffic lights and the reduced pace necessary to avoid drawing attention. Maya had planned her route the night before, identifying 2 alternate paths in case of obstacles and noting the locations of what could serve as cover points if needed. Old habits. Jefferson High was larger than it had appeared from her bedroom window. The building sprawled across several acres, with additions and portable classrooms creating a maze that would have challenged even experienced squad leaders. Students flowed around her like water around a stone, chattering, laughing, shouting to friends across the courtyard. None of them noticed the new girl who moved with the controlled grace of someone trained to kill. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of conversation as she walked. Complaints about homework. Excitement about weekend parties. Gossip about relationships and rivalries that seemed impossibly trivial after years of life and death decisions. A part of her envied their innocence, while another part felt frustrated by their ignorance of how close they'd all come to extinction. The main office smelled like coffee and copy toner. The secretary, Mrs. Patterson, had the harried look of someone managing controlled chaos on a daily basis. She glanced up when Maya approached, her expression shifting from bureaucratic efficiency to something softer. "You must be Maya Chen," she said, her voice gentle in the way adults used when they thought teenagers were fragile. "Welcome to Jefferson High. I have your schedule right here." Maya accepted the papers with the same gravity she'd once used to receive mission briefings. First period, Advanced Chemistry with Mr. Rodriguez. Second period, AP Physics with Dr. Kim. The academic load was challenging but manageable. Her military education had covered most of the material, often in greater depth than civilian schools required. "Your guidance counselor, Ms. Foster, wanted to meet with you before classes start," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Just to check in and see if you have any questions." Questions. Maya had thousands of them, but none that a high school guidance counselor could answer. How do you make friends when you've spent years giving orders that could result in people's deaths? How do you care about grades when you've seen entire planets burn? How do you pretend that any of this matters when you know how quickly civilization can collapse? Miss Foster's office was small and cluttered, filled with motivational posters that seemed designed to convince teenagers that their problems were both important and solvable. The guidance counselor herself was younger than Maya had expected, probably only 10 years older than Maya's official age, though the gap in life experience felt like geological epochs. "Maya, I'm so glad to meet you," Ms. Foster said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I know this must be a big adjustment." "Big adjustment." Maya settled into the chair, automatically assessing the room's exits and potential threats. The habit was so ingrained she barely noticed doing it anymore. "I've reviewed your transcripts from the military education program," Ms. Foster continued, shuffling through a file folder. "Your academic performance is exceptional. Really impressive scores across the board. But I want you to know that if you need any support adjusting to civilian school life, my door is always open." The woman meant well. Maya could see it in her earnest expression, hear it in the careful way she chose her words. But there was also something else, a kind of fascinated uncertainty, like someone trying to communicate with an interesting but potentially dangerous animal. "I don't anticipate any problems," Maya said, falling back on the formal language that had served her well in military briefings. "Of course not," Ms. Foster replied quickly. "I just want you to know that it's normal to feel overwhelmed. High school has its own social dynamics, and jumping in as a senior can be challenging for anyone." Social dynamics. Another battlefield where Maya lacked proper intelligence. She'd studied alien psychology and command hierarchies, but teenage social structures remained largely mysterious. Her years in the military had been spent among adults who were focused on survival and mission success. Personal drama and social positioning had been luxuries they couldn't afford. "I understand there may be some curiosity about your background," Ms. Foster continued delicately. "Students might ask questions. You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with." Maya nodded, though she suspected the issue would be more complex than Ms. Foster imagined. The official story was that Maya had been in a special educational program during the war years. It wasn't technically a lie, but it also wasn't the kind of truth that would satisfy curious teenagers. The bell rang, a harsh electronic buzz that made Maya's hand twitch toward a weapon she wasn't carrying. Around them, the school came alive with the thunder of footsteps and locker doors slamming shut. "Well," Miss Foster said with a bright smile, "time for your first class. Mr. Rodriguez is excellent, you're going to love chemistry." Maya gathered her papers and stood, moving with the controlled efficiency that marked her as different from every other student in the building. As she stepped into the hallway, the full reality of her situation hit her. She was 17 years old. She'd saved the human race. And now she had to figure out how to survive high school. The corridors of Jefferson High were rivers of chaos. Students flowed between classes in patterns that seemed random but followed their own logic, faster streams near the main stairways, eddies around popular gathering spots, quiet pools in the areas where the unpopular kids tried to remain invisible. Maya moved against the current, her destination clear in her mind. Room 237, Advanced Chemistry, Mr. Rodriguez. She'd memorized the layout, but actually navigating through hundreds of bodies was a different challenge than studying a floor plan. A group of boys near her locker bank were loud enough to penetrate even the general din. Maya's enhanced hearing caught fragments of their conversation as she passed. Heard she was in some kind of military school. My dad says there were kids who got recruited for special programs. Probably just homeschooled by crazy parents. Maya kept walking, her expression neutral. Intelligence gathering had taught her that people revealed more when they thought they weren't being observed. If these students were already speculating about her background, it meant word was spreading faster than she'd anticipated. Room 237 was on the second floor, at the end of a hallway lined with motivational posters and student artwork. Maya arrived 3 minutes early, late enough not to seem overeager, early enough to secure a tactical advantage in seating selection. Mr. Rodriguez was arranging equipment on his demonstration table when Maya entered. He looked up with the kind of smile teachers reserved for new students, welcoming but evaluative. "You must be Maya," he said. "Welcome to Advanced Chemistry. You can take any seat you'd like." Maya scanned the room with the same attention she'd once used to evaluate battlefields. 30 desks arranged in 6 rows of 5. Windows along the eastern wall, good for natural light, potential vulnerability if under siege. Single door entry point. Emergency shower and eyewash station in the back corner. She selected a desk in the 4th row, 3rd from the left. Close enough to the front to demonstrate engagement, far enough back to observe without being obvious about it. Near the window for emergency egress if necessary, but not so close as to be silhouetted if someone wanted to take a shot from outside. Dr. Martinez would have a field day analyzing that thought process, Maya realized. The war had been over for 6 months, but her tactical mindset remained stubbornly operational. Other students began filtering in as the late bell approached. Maya watched them with the same analytical attention she'd once applied to alien behavioral patterns. The social hierarchies were immediately apparent: popular kids claiming the center seats, outcasts gravitating toward the walls, academic achievers positioning themselves for optimal teacher interaction. A girl with perfectly styled blonde hair and clothing that probably cost more than Maya's monthly military pay settled into the desk directly in front of her. She turned around with a smile that seemed friendly on the surface but carried an undertone Maya couldn't quite identify. "I'm Jessica," she said, her voice pitched to carry to nearby desks. "You're the new girl, right? Maya?" "That's correct," Maya replied, falling back on military courtesy. "Cool," Jessica said, though her eyes were calculating rather than warm. "Where did you transfer from?" The question Maya had been dreading. The simple answer would be to repeat the cover story about a special educational program. But something in Jessica's tone suggested this wasn't casual curiosity. "I was homeschooled," Maya said, which was technically true if you considered military training a form of education. "For 4 years?" Jessica's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's so interesting. What did your parents do for work that kept you out of regular school?" Before Maya could answer, Mr. Rodriguez called for attention. "Good morning, everyone. Before we dive into our unit on chemical kinetics, I want to introduce our new student, Maya Chen." All eyes turned toward her. Maya felt the familiar weight of command attention, but this was different. In military briefings, people looked to her for orders, for solutions, for leadership. Here, the attention felt like examination under a microscope. "Maya comes to us with an exceptional academic background," Mr. Rodriguez continued. "I'm sure you'll all make her feel welcome." Maya nodded acknowledgement but didn't speak. In her experience, the less said during introductions, the better. Let people make their own assumptions rather than providing ammunition. The lesson began with a review of reaction rates and catalysts. Maya found herself simultaneously bored and fascinated. Bored because the material was elementary compared to the theoretical chemistry she'd studied while designing new propulsion systems. Fascinated because she'd never seen chemistry taught as pure academic exercise rather than practical application. When Mr. Rodriguez began discussing the effect of temperature on reaction rates, Maya's hand shot up before she could stop herself. "What about reactions in vacuum conditions?" she asked. "How do the principles change when you eliminate atmospheric pressure variables?" The classroom fell silent. Mr. Rodriguez blinked, clearly not expecting such an advanced question on the first day. That's actually a very sophisticated question," he said slowly. "In vacuum conditions, you're dealing with a completely different set of parameters. Most high school chemistry focuses on reactions at standard temperature and pressure, but you're talking about space-based chemistry, which is more of a college-level topic." Maya realized her mistake too late. A normal high school student wouldn't ask about vacuum reactions. She'd revealed too much of her actual knowledge base. "I just wondered," she said, trying to sound casual. "I read a lot of science fiction." Science fiction. The explanation felt like a betrayal of everything she'd actually experienced. The friends who'd died in vacuum when their ships were breached. The delicate chemical processes that kept life support functioning on long-range patrols. The explosive reactions that powered weapons capable of cracking planets. But it was an explanation the class could accept. Several students chuckled, and Maya saw some of the tension leave their faces. Weird new girl who read too much sci-fi was a familiar archetype. Much safer than whatever they'd been imagining. The rest of the class passed without incident. Maya forced herself to ask only age-appropriate questions and to occasionally pretend confusion about concepts she could have explained better than the textbook. It was exhausting in a way that combat had never been. When the bell rang, students began gathering their books with the practiced efficiency of people following a routine they'd perfected over years. Maya moved to do the same, but Jessica turned around again. "That was a really smart question," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "About the vacuum thing. You must read some pretty advanced sci-fi." "Sometimes," Maya replied, sensing a trap but uncertain of its nature. "My boyfriend is really into that stuff too. Space battles and military strategy and all that." Jessica's smile sharpened slightly. "He's actually president of the science fiction club. You should totally come to one of our meetings." Maya nodded politely and escaped into the hallway, but she could feel Jessica's eyes following her. The girl was intelligent and socially sophisticated, exactly the type of person who would notice inconsistencies in Maya's story. Second period was AP Physics with Dr. Kim, and Maya made a mental note to be more careful about revealing her knowledge. She selected another tactically advantageous seat and prepared to spend the next 45 minutes pretending to be normal. Dr. Kim was older than Mr. Rodriguez, with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades explaining complex concepts to teenagers. The classroom was arranged more like a laboratory, with blacktop tables instead of individual desks. "Today we're beginning our unit on orbital mechanics," Dr. Kim announced as students settled into their seats. "Can anyone tell me what forces govern the motion of objects in space?" Several hands went up. Maya kept hers firmly in her lap, despite the fact that she'd personally calculated orbital trajectories for fleet movements and had spent months living in various gravitational fields. Dr. Kim called on a boy in the front row, who gave a textbook answer about gravity and centripetal force. The explanation was correct but simplified, lacking the nuance necessary for actual space operations. "Good," Dr. Kim said. "Now, who can tell me why satellites don't just fall to Earth?" More hands. Maya bit her tongue to keep from mentioning the dozens of satellites she'd watched fail and fall when their orbital mechanics were disrupted by enemy action. The discussion continued with students offering pieces of the puzzle while Dr. Kim guided them toward understanding. It was educational theory in action, letting students discover concepts rather than simply lecturing. Maya appreciated the pedagogy even as she struggled with the pace. "Let's try a practical problem," Dr. Kim said, turning to write on the whiteboard. "A satellite is orbiting Earth at an altitude of 400 kilometers. What's its orbital velocity?" Maya knew the answer immediately. She'd lived it, calculated variations of it hundreds of times, felt the reality of it in her bones during zero-G maneuvers. But she waited while other students worked through the math, occasionally raising her hand to contribute small pieces of the solution. "Excellent work, everyone," Dr. Kim said when they'd reached the correct answer. "This kind of calculation is crucial for understanding how we put objects in space." A girl with dark hair and wire-rimmed glasses raised her hand. "Dr. Kim, is it true that there were teenagers who worked on space missions during the war?" Maya's blood turned cold. The question was too specific, too pointed to be coincidental. Dr. Kim paused, choosing his words carefully. There were certainly young people who contributed to the war effort in various capacities. The military recruited individuals with exceptional aptitudes for certain roles. But, like actual teenagers, the girl pressed. "Flying spaceships and stuff?" "The specific details of military operations remain classified," Dr. Kim replied diplomatically. "But, I can tell you that when humanity's survival is at stake, age becomes less important than capability." Maya kept her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. Someone was fishing for information. Whether it was general curiosity or specific suspicion about her, she couldn't tell. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Maya remained hyper-alert for the rest of the period. When class ended, she noticed the dark-haired girl watching her with obvious interest. Third period was American history with Mrs. Thompson, and Maya was relieved to find herself on more neutral ground. History was safely in the past, unlikely to trigger revelations about her actual experiences. Or so she thought. Today we're discussing the home front during the recent war, Mrs. Thompson announced. How did civilian populations contribute to the war effort? Maya realized she was in trouble again. This wasn't ancient history, this was the war she'd fought in, seen from a perspective she'd never really considered. Students began sharing stories their parents had told them. Food rationing. Blackouts during orbital bombardment threats. Families receiving news about loved ones serving in distant star systems. One boy talked about his older brother, who'd served on a destroyer in the Kepler system. He said they had this crazy young captain who saved their whole fleet, he said. Some kind of tactical genius who figured out how to break the siege. Maya's pulse quickened. The Kepler system. The siege she'd broken by coordinating a complex multi-fleet maneuver that had cost her 3 months of sleep and nearly gotten her court-martialed for insubordination. My dad was at Kepler Station, another student added. He said the defense of the station was like something out of a movie. Impossible odds, but somehow they held. They held because Maya had been there. Because she'd convinced Admiral Morrison to let her coordinate the defense despite being 15 years old. Because she'd seen patterns in the enemy attack that experienced officers had missed. It's interesting how war creates heroes, Mrs. Thompson said thoughtfully. Sometimes from the most unexpected places. Maya stared at her desk, fighting the urge to speak. These students were talking about her life, her battles, her victories and losses, as if they were ancient history. They had no idea that the person who'd made some of their stories possible was sitting 3 desks away, pretending to be just another high school senior. The discussion continued, covering topics Maya had lived through from the inside. Supply chain logistics she'd helped plan. Tactical innovations she'd developed. Battles she'd fought while these students were worried about homework assignments. When the bell finally rang, Maya escaped into the hallway with relief that lasted approximately 30 seconds. That's how long it took her to realize that Jessica was waiting for her. Maya. Jessica called out, falling into step beside her. How are your classes going? Finding everything okay? Fine, Maya replied, wary of the girl's persistent attention. That's great. Hey, I was thinking you should sit with us at lunch today. My friends would love to meet you. It wasn't really a request. Maya recognized the tone from her military experience. It was the way superior officers issued orders they wanted you to think were suggestions. I appreciate the offer, Maya began, but Jessica was already steering her toward the cafeteria. No problem at all. We always sit at the corner table by the windows. You'll love my friends, they're really interested in meeting the mysterious new girl. Mysterious new girl. Maya wondered exactly what rumors were circulating and how much truth they contained. The cafeteria was a sensory assault of competing smells, voices, and movement. Hundreds of students clustered around circular tables, their conversations blending into white noise punctuated by occasional laughter or shouting. Maya followed Jessica toward a table where 5 other students were already seated. They looked up as the 2 girls approached, their expressions ranging from curious to calculating. Everyone, this is Maya, Jessica announced, gesturing for Maya to sit in the empty chair they'd obviously saved for her. Maya, meet the crew. Introductions followed quickly. Brad, Jessica's boyfriend and president of the science fiction club. Sarah, editor of the school newspaper. Marcus, captain of the debate team. Emma, who apparently ran the school's social media accounts. Lisa, whose father worked for a government contractor. Maya filed away the information automatically. These weren't just random students, they were the school's information brokers, the ones who knew everything about everyone. Sitting with them felt like walking into an intelligence operation. So Maya, Brad said once she'd settled into her seat. Jessica mentioned you're into science fiction. What kind of stuff do you read? The question seemed innocent enough, but Maya had learned to be suspicious of innocent questions. Various authors, she replied vaguely. Cool, cool. I'm really into the military sci-fi stuff myself. You know, space battles and tactical warfare. There's something fascinating about how combat might work in 3-dimensional space. Maya nearly choked on her sandwich. Of all the topics these students could have chosen, they'd landed on the one she knew more about than anyone else alive. It's interesting, she managed. Right? Brad leaned forward, his enthusiasm apparently genuine. Like, how do you coordinate multiple ships across vast distances? How do you account for time lag in communications? How do you predict enemy movements when you're dealing with orbital mechanics? Every question Brad asked was something Maya had solved in real combat situations. She'd coordinated fleets across light minutes of distance, managed communication delays that could mean life or death, and learned to think in 3 dimensions while enemy missiles tracked her ship. I imagine it would be challenging, she said carefully. Totally. I've been reading about this battle in the Kepler system, where they broke the siege. The tactical analysis suggests someone was using predictive algorithms way beyond anything we thought was possible. Like, whoever coordinated the defense had to be thinking on a completely different level. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. Brad was unknowingly discussing her greatest military achievement as if it were fiction. Maybe they just got lucky, she suggested. No way, Sarah interjected. I did a report on it for journalism class. The precision of the timing, the coordination between different fleet elements, that wasn't luck. That was genius-level tactical thinking. From what I heard, Marcus added, the person running that operation was really young. Like, impossibly young for that kind of responsibility. Maya's hands tightened around her sandwich. These students were circling closer to the truth than they realized. Speaking of young, Lisa said casually, Maya, what did you say your parents did? You mentioned being homeschooled for 4 years, that's a pretty big commitment. The conversation had shifted back to Maya personally, and she could feel the trap closing around her. These students were intelligent and persistent. They'd identified inconsistencies in her story and were working together to extract information. My parents value alternative education, Maya said, which was technically true if you considered military service educational. That's so cool, Emma said. What kind of alternative curriculum did they use? Was it online, or more hands-on learning? Hands-on, Maya replied, thinking of plasma burns and vacuum exposure. Awesome. Like, practical skills and real-world applications? Yes. That explains why you asked such an advanced question in chemistry, Brad said. And, you seem really comfortable with the physics concepts too. Maya realized she was failing the interrogation. Each answer she gave was technically truthful but only raised more questions. She needed to redirect the conversation or extract herself entirely. What about you? She asked Jessica. What are your plans after graduation? The deflection worked. Jessica launched into a detailed description of her college applications and career aspirations, giving Maya time to think. These students weren't malicious, they were genuinely curious about their new classmate. But their curiosity was dangerous precisely because it was intelligent and persistent. Maya listened with half her attention while assessing her options. She could continue deflecting, but that would only make them more suspicious. She could provide a more detailed cover story, but lies had a way of multiplying and becoming unmanageable. Or she could find a way to discourage their interest entirely. The conversation flowed around her, touching on topics that felt surreal after years of military service. College plans. Weekend parties. Dating drama. Social media conflicts. All of it seemed to matter intensely to these students, but Maya couldn't connect with the emotional investment they brought to such issues. When lunch ended, Maya escaped to her locker, grateful for a few minutes alone. The day was only half over, and she was already exhausted by the effort of maintaining her cover. In combat, you could trust your training and instincts. In high school, every interaction felt like navigating a minefield blindfolded. Fourth period was English literature with Ms. Patterson. Maya hoped the subject would be safely neutral, but her optimism died when she saw the day's assignment written on the whiteboard, Heroism in Literature, What Makes a Hero? Maya took her seat and prepared for another 45 minutes of pretending her life wasn't the subject under discussion. Miss Patterson was the kind of teacher who believed literature could change lives. She had wild curly hair, wore flowing scarves that seemed to move independently, and spoke about fictional characters as if they were personal friends. Maya found her both fascinating and exhausting. Heroes, Miss Patterson began, perching on the edge of her desk, come in many forms. Today we're going to explore what truly defines heroism. Is it courage? Self-sacrifice? The ability to inspire others? Maya stared at her notebook, trying to blend into her seat. After spending lunch being interrogated about her background, the last thing she needed was a philosophical discussion about heroism. Let's start with classical heroes, Ms. Patterson continued. Think Achilles, Odysseus, Beowulf. What characteristics do they share? Several students raised their hands. Maya kept hers firmly on her desk. Strength, offered a boy in the front row. Bravery, added a girl near the windows. The willingness to fight for others, said another student. Miss Patterson nodded approvingly. Excellent observations. Now, what about modern heroes? How has our definition of heroism evolved? This time, the answers came faster. Students talked about everyday heroes, teachers, doctors, firefighters. People who served others without expecting recognition or reward. But, what about war heroes? Asked a voice from the back of the room. Maya turned to see Marcus, the debate team captain from lunch. People who make impossible decisions under extreme circumstances? Maya's stomach clenched. Marcus was looking directly at her while he spoke. War heroes are particularly complex, Ms. Patterson replied thoughtfully. They often face moral ambiguity that classical heroes never encountered. Modern warfare isn't about honored duels or slaying monsters, it's about split-second decisions that affect thousands of lives. Like the ghost of Kepler Station, said Sarah, the newspaper editor. I've been researching that story for an article. Whoever coordinated that defense had to make decisions that saved millions of people, but probably cost thousands of others their lives. Maya's pen snapped in her grip. The sharp crack echoed in the suddenly quiet classroom. Sorry, she mumbled, staring at the broken pieces of plastic in her hands. Accident. Miss Patterson's eyes lingered on Maya for a moment before continuing the discussion. The ghost of Kepler Station is an interesting case study. We know very little about the actual person behind that nickname, but their actions demonstrate the burden that true heroism can carry. What kind of burden? Asked Emma, genuinely curious. The weight of responsibility, Ms. Patterson explained. When your decisions determine who lives and dies, when you carry the hopes and fears of millions of people, when you sacrifice your own humanity for the greater good that changes a person. Heroes often pay a price that the people they save never fully understand. Maya felt the words hit her like physical blows. Every night, she dreamed of the people she'd failed to save. Every morning, she woke to the memory of orders she'd given that had sent good soldiers to their deaths. Every quiet moment was filled with the voices of those who trusted her judgment and paid the ultimate price. But that's just speculation, right? Brad interjected. I mean, we don't actually know anything about the person behind that operation. True, Ms. Patterson agreed. But we can examine the psychological impact through literature. Heroes in stories often struggle with the aftermath of their actions. Achilles had his rage. Odysseus had his guilt. Modern heroes have PTSD and survivor's remorse. Maya closed her eyes, fighting the wave of recognition that threatened to overwhelm her. Dr. Martinez had used those exact terms during their sessions. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Survivor's guilt. Clinical names for the weight that pressed down on her chest every morning. Maya? Miss Patterson's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you feeling all right? Maya opened her eyes to find the entire class staring at her. Her hands were shaking, she realized. Actually trembling like she was under enemy fire. I'm fine, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Just thinking about the discussion. Miss Patterson's expression was concerned but not suspicious. Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts? You seem to have a strong reaction to this topic. Strong reaction. Maya almost laughed at the understatement. She was having a strong reaction to hearing her life dissected as a theoretical concept by teenagers who thought war was an abstract idea. I think, Maya said carefully, that heroism is often misunderstood. People focus on the dramatic moments, the battles won, the lives saved. But they don't think about what happens afterward. What the hero has to live with. The classroom was completely silent now. Maya realized she'd spoken with more passion than she'd intended, revealing more of herself than was safe. That's a very mature perspective, Ms. Patterson said gently. What makes you think about the aftermath? Maya felt the trap closing around her again. Another question that required her to explain knowledge she shouldn't possess. Books, she said finally. I read a lot of books about war. It was becoming her standard deflection, and she could see that some of her classmates were starting to recognize the pattern. Jessica and her friends exchanged glances that Maya pretended not to notice. The discussion continued, but Maya stopped participating. She listened as her classmates debated theoretical concepts of courage and sacrifice while she remembered the actual taste of fear and the weight of command responsibility. Their words felt like shadows cast by experiences they could never understand. When the bell finally rang, Maya gathered her things quickly, hoping to escape before anyone could corner her. But Marcus was faster. That was a really insightful comment, he said, falling into step beside her. About heroism being misunderstood. You sounded like you'd really thought about it. It's an interesting topic, Maya replied neutrally. Definitely. Hey, are you planning to stay for any after-school activities? Debate team is always looking for new members, and you'd be great at it. Maya considered the offer. Debate team would mean more time around Marcus, who was clearly intelligent and observant. It would also mean defending positions and arguing cases, skills she possessed, but that might reveal too much about her analytical training. I'm not sure I'd be good at debate, she said. Are you kidding? You think strategically, you analyze complex situations, and you're not afraid to challenge assumptions. Those are exactly the skills we need. Strategic thinking. Complex analysis. Challenge assumptions. Marcus was describing military leadership qualities, and Maya wondered if he was doing it intentionally. I'll think about it, she said, which was her polite way of saying no. Cool. No pressure. But if you change your mind, we meet Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. Maya nodded and escaped to her final period of the day, study hall. She'd been looking forward to 45 minutes of relative peace, but even that hope was dashed when she walked into the library and found Jessica's entire lunch table clustered around a computer terminal. They looked up when she entered, their expressions ranging from excited to guilty. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of whispered conversation as she passed their table. Military records are classified, but there are news reports. Check the casualty lists from Kepler Station. Age would match up if she was recruited early. Maya kept walking, her heart pounding. They were researching her. Actually trying to connect her cover story to public records from the war. She found a table in the far corner of the library and sat down, pretending to work on homework while listening to their continued discussion. Look at this, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible even to Maya's enhanced hearing. There's a record here of a tactical consultant mentioned in the after-action report from Kepler Station. No name, but they list the age as 15. 15? Emma's voice rose slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again. That's impossible. They wouldn't put a 15-year-old in charge of a military operation. Unless they had no choice, Marcus said quietly. Remember what Ms. Patterson said about heroes paying a price? What if the price was childhood itself? Maya closed her eyes, fighting the urge to get up and walk over to their table. They were talking about her again, but this time they were getting close to the truth. Too close. But why would someone like that be in high school now? Brad asked. I mean, if you'd commanded a battle like that, would you really want to sit through chemistry class? Maybe she doesn't have a choice, Lisa suggested. Government mandate. Social reintegration. Making up for lost time. Lost time. Maya almost laughed at the phrase. She hadn't lost time, she'd spent it saving the human race. But, from the perspective of normal teenagers, she supposed 4 years of military service did represent time lost from the traditional high school experience. We could just ask her, Emma said. Directly. See how she reacts. No way, Jessica replied quickly. If she wanted us to know, she would have told us. Besides, if we're right about who she is, then she's been through enough without us pestering her about it. Maya felt an unexpected pang of gratitude toward Jessica. Despite her persistence earlier, the girl was showing genuine consideration for Maya's privacy. But, if we're right, Sarah said, then, we have the most famous war hero of our generation sitting in our chemistry class. That's huge. Famous war hero. Maya wanted to correct them, she wasn't famous, she was classified. Most of her achievements were buried in military records that wouldn't be declassified for decades. The nickname Ghost of Kepler Station existed precisely because her real identity was protected. The conversation continued in whispers too low for normal hearing to catch. Maya strained to listen, learning more about how she was perceived than any intelligence briefing had ever provided. They thought she was a hero. They were right about her age and general service record, though they lacked specific details. Most importantly, they were choosing to respect her privacy rather than confronting her directly. Maya spent the rest of study hall pretending to read a history textbook while actually monitoring their research. They found more hints and circumstantial evidence, but nothing that definitively connected her civilian identity to her military record. The classification protocols were holding, at least for now. When the final bell rang, Maya gathered her things and headed for her locker. The day had been more challenging than any battlefield, requiring constant vigilance and careful management of information. She was exhausted in a way that physical combat had never achieved. Maya. She turned to find Dr. Kim approaching, a stack of papers in his hands. I'm glad I caught you, he said. I wanted to give you some additional reading material for physics. Based on your questions today, I think you might enjoy some more advanced topics. Maya accepted the papers gratefully. Dr. Kim was offering her a lifeline, challenging academic work that might help her channel her restless energy in a productive direction. Thank you, she said, genuinely appreciative. No problem. And, Maya? Dr. Kim lowered his voice slightly. If you ever want to talk about the practical applications of what we're studying in class, my door is always open. I have a feeling you might have some interesting perspectives on real-world physics. Real-world physics. Maya nodded, understanding the subtext. Dr. Kim suspected something about her background, but he was offering support rather than interrogation. Maya walked home through the same suburban streets she'd traveled that morning, but everything felt different now. The houses looked smaller. The problems that seemed to consume her classmates felt more distant. The gap between her experience and theirs seemed wider than the space between star systems. At dinner, her parents asked the usual questions. How were her classes? Did she make any friends? Was she adjusting well? Maya gave the usual answers. Classes were fine. She'd met some interesting people. Adjustment was a process. What she didn't tell them was that a group of intelligent teenagers were actively investigating her identity. That her teachers were beginning to suspect she had unusual knowledge. That every conversation felt like a tactical engagement requiring careful information management. After dinner, Maya retreated to her room and sat at her desk, staring at the advanced physics readings Dr. Kim had given her. The equations were familiar, she'd used variations of them to calculate jump coordinates and orbital insertions. But seeing them in an educational context rather than a tactical one felt strange. Her tablet chimed with a message notification. Maya opened it to find a friend request on the school's social media platform from Jessica, along with a short note, "Great meeting you today. Looking forward to getting to know you better." Maya stared at the request for several minutes. Accepting it would give Jessica access to her largely empty profile and connect her more deeply to the school's social network. It was a risk, but refusing might seem suspicious. She accepted the request and was immediately added to a group chat called Lunch Crew. Messages were already flowing. Brad, Maya seems really cool. Definitely joining Sci-Fi Club, right? Sarah, did you guys notice how she reacted during English? When we were talking about war heroes? Marcus, she's been through something. I can tell. Emma, we should be supportive. Whatever her story is, she probably needs friends. Lisa, agreed. No more detective work. Just friendship. Jessica, Maya, welcome to the chaos. Fair warning, these people never shut up. Smiling face with smiling eyes, Maya typed and deleted several responses before settling on, thanks for including me. It seemed safe and grateful without revealing anything significant. The conversation continued around her, touching on homework assignments and weekend plans. Maya found herself oddly comforted by the mundane chatter. For the first time since returning to civilian life, she felt like she was part of something normal. But normal was a luxury she wasn't sure she deserved. While these students worried about test scores and social drama, Maya carried the weight of decisions that had shaped the course of human history. While they planned for college and careers, she tried to figure out how to live with memories that would never fade. Her tablet chimed again with a private message from Jessica. Hey, I know today was probably overwhelming. New schools are hard even without everyone being curious about you. If you ever want to talk or need someone to show you around, I'm here. Maya stared at the message for a long time. Jessica was being genuinely kind, offering friendship without expecting anything in return. It was exactly the kind of gesture that Dr. Martinez said would help with her reintegration process. Thank you, Maya typed back. I appreciate it. No problem. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow. Maya closed the tablet and prepared for bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. More questions to deflect. More conversations to navigate carefully. More opportunities to accidentally reveal too much about who she really was. As she lay in the dark, Maya tried to imagine what her life might have been like if the war had never happened. Would she have been like Jessica and her friends? Concerned about grades and social status? Excited about college applications and weekend parties? It was impossible to know. The war had shaped her in ways that couldn't be undone. It had given her skills and knowledge that set her apart from everyone around her. But it had also taken something away, the ability to find meaning in the small concerns that occupied most teenagers' lives. Maya closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept replaying the day's conversations. Her classmates were good people, intelligent, curious, and kinder than she'd expected. They were also getting close to truths that could complicate her life in ways she wasn't prepared for. Tomorrow, she decided, she would be more careful. More normal. She would find a way to fit into their world without losing herself entirely. But first, she had to figure out exactly who she wanted to be in this strange new life where her greatest achievements were classified secrets and her most important skills had no practical application. The alarm would ring at 0600 hours, just like every morning. And Maya would face another day of pretending that saving the human race had prepared her for surviving high school. Outside her window, Jefferson High School sat silent in the darkness, waiting for tomorrow's battles to begin. Maya's second day at Jefferson High started with a crisis she hadn't anticipated. Her locker wouldn't open. She stood in the crowded hallway, trying the combination for the third time while students flowed around her like water around a stone. The metal door remained stubbornly locked, and Maya felt her tactical mind automatically begin assessing the situation. Force application points. Structural weaknesses. Alternative access methods. Having trouble? Maya turned to find a boy she didn't recognize standing beside her. He was tall and thin, with dark skin and intelligent eyes that seemed older than his face suggested. Unlike most of the students she'd observed, he wasn't trying to project any particular social image. His clothes were practical rather than fashionable, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. The combination doesn't seem to work, Maya replied, grateful that someone was offering help rather than staring at her struggle. School lockers are notorious for being finicky, he said, stepping closer. Mind if I try? Sometimes it's just about the rhythm. Maya stepped aside and watched as he worked the combination with practiced ease. The lock clicked open on his first attempt. Thank you, she said, genuinely appreciative. I'm Maya. David Park, he replied. And you're the new girl everyone's been talking about. Maya's defenses immediately went up. Talking about? Nothing bad, David said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. It's just unusual for someone to transfer in as a senior. People are curious. Maya nodded, relaxing slightly. Curiosity was manageable. It was active investigation that worried her. I heard Jessica Chen recruited you for her lunch table yesterday, David continued. Fair warning, that group is nice, but they're also the school's unofficial intelligence network. They know everything about everyone. I noticed, Maya said dryly. David grinned. Yeah, they're not exactly subtle. Look, I know we just met, but if you want a quieter place to eat lunch, there's a group of us who usually sit outside by the science building. Less interrogation, more actual eating. It was an attractive offer. Maya had been dreading another lunch with Jessica's group, knowing they'd continue probing for information about her background. Who's US? She asked. Mostly science and tech kids. Computer programmers, engineering wannabes, a few debate team refugees who got tired of arguing all the time. David's description made them sound like Maya's kind of people, analytical thinkers who appreciated competence over popularity. I'd like that, Maya said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Great. Meet us by the flagpole after fourth period, and I'll introduce you around. David headed off to his first class, leaving Maya to contemplate this unexpected development. She'd been so focused on managing Jessica's group that she hadn't considered there might be other social options available. First period chemistry was a review of molecular structures. Maya found herself doodling orbital diagrams in her notebook margins while Mr. Rodriguez explained concepts she'd learned during her xenobiology training. The irony wasn't lost on her, she'd studied alien biochemistry to help develop better weapons, and now she was pretending to learn basic human chemistry for a grade. Maya, Mr. Rodriguez said, pulling her attention back to the class. Would you like to work through this next problem? Maya looked at the whiteboard, where he'd written a complex molecular formula. The compound looked familiar, though she couldn't immediately place it. It's a catalyst used in fuel production, she said, then caught herself. I mean, I think it might be. It looks similar to diagrams I've seen. Excellent observation, Mr. Rodriguez replied. This is indeed a catalyst used in hydrogen fuel cells. Very advanced application for high school chemistry. Maya nodded and tried to look appropriately pleased with her lucky guess. Around her, classmates were taking notes and looking impressed. She noticed Jessica glancing at her with renewed interest. The rest of chemistry passed without incident, but Maya could feel the weight of observation. Students were paying attention to her in ways they hadn't the day before. Word was spreading about the new girl who asked advanced questions and made insightful comments. Second period physics was more of the same. Dr. Kim had obviously decided to challenge Maya after her performance the previous day. When he discussed satellite orbital periods, he called on her specifically to work through the calculations. Maya found herself in an impossible position. The math was elementary compared to what she'd done during real space operations, but she couldn't demonstrate that level of competence without raising suspicions. She had to find the balance between seeming reasonably intelligent and accidentally revealing her true capabilities. The orbital period would be approximately 96 minutes, she said after working through the problem at normal student speed. Correct, Dr. Kim replied. And how did you arrive at that calculation so quickly? Maya realized her mistake too late. She'd solved the problem faster than she should have been able to, despite deliberately slowing down her work. Lucky guess, she said, falling back on her standard deflection. I used to read a lot about space travel. Dr. Kim's expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that explanation, but he moved on to the next topic. Maya made a mental note to be even more careful about demonstrating her knowledge. Third period American history was covering post-war reconstruction efforts, the massive undertaking of rebuilding human civilization after the alien threat had been eliminated. Maya listened to Mrs. Thompson describe challenges and solutions she'd helped implement, policies she'd advised on, and programs she'd watched succeed or fail from the inside. The integration of military veterans back into civilian society has been one of the most complex aspects of Reconstruction, Mrs. Thompson explained. Many of these individuals served during their formative years and struggle with readjusting to peacetime life. Maya felt every eye in the classroom turn toward her. The description was so accurate it might as well have been her psychological profile. It's particularly challenging for young veterans, Mrs. Thompson continued, either unaware of or deliberately ignoring the class's reaction. Imagine spending your teenage years in high-stress, high-responsibility environments, then trying to adapt to the relatively low-stakes world of civilian education. High-stress, high-responsibility environments. Low-stakes civilian education. Maya wanted to sink through the floor. Mrs. Thompson was describing her situation with clinical precision. "Are there support programs?" asked a student in the front row. "Yes, though they're still being developed. The government recognizes that traditional counseling and educational approaches may not work for individuals with unusual backgrounds." Unusual backgrounds. Maya gripped her pen so tightly she was afraid it might break again. "The key," Mrs. Thompson concluded, "is creating environments where these veterans feel valued for their unique perspectives while also helping them develop the social skills needed for civilian life." When class ended, Maya escaped to the hallway, but her relief was short-lived. Marcus was waiting for her outside the classroom door. "That was an interesting discussion," he said, falling into step beside her. Mrs. Thompson seemed to be speaking from very specific knowledge. "It's an important topic," Maya replied carefully. "Definitely. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday about heroism being misunderstood. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that." Maya stopped walking and turned to face Marcus directly. "Why?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Because you have interesting perspectives. Because you think about things differently than most people our age." "How do you know how I think?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "The way you approach problems. The questions you ask. The things you notice that other people miss." He paused. "You see patterns that suggest you've been trained to analyze complex situations." Trained to analyze complex situations. Maya realized that Marcus wasn't just curious, he was conducting a careful interrogation, using skills that suggested he'd been trained too. "What exactly are you asking me?" Maya said. "I'm asking if you'd like to have lunch with someone who isn't going to spend the whole time trying to figure out your secrets," Marcus replied. "I'm asking if you'd like to talk to someone who understands that some experiences can't be easily explained to people who haven't shared them." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agendas. What she saw was genuine understanding and something that looked like recognition. "You sound like you're speaking from experience," she said. "Maybe I am," Marcus replied quietly. "Maybe we have more in common than you'd expect." Before Maya could respond, the bell rang for fourth period. Marcus handed her a small piece of paper. "Library. After school. If you want to talk to someone who gets it." He walked away before Maya could ask what it was supposed to mean. She unfolded the paper to find a simple message: "Some stories can't be told, but that doesn't mean you have to carry them alone." Maya stared at the note for a long moment. Either Marcus was an exceptionally perceptive teenager, or he had his own secrets that made him recognize hers. Fourth period English literature focused on modern poetry, which Maya found less threatening than discussions of heroism. Miss Patterson read several poems about war and loss, but the abstract nature of poetry felt safer than yesterday's direct analysis of her actions. When the period ended, Maya made her way to the flagpole to meet David Park's group. She was curious about this alternative social option, especially after her increasingly complicated interactions with Jessica's crowd. David was waiting by the flagpole with 4 other students. He waved when he saw Maya approaching. "Everyone, this is Maya," he said. "Maya, meet the outcasts and misfits." The introductions were refreshingly straightforward. Alex, a junior who spent most of his time building robots. Sam, a senior who'd already been accepted to MIT for computer science. Rita, a sophomore who was somehow taking calculus and organic chemistry simultaneously. And Jordan, whose gender presentation was deliberately ambiguous and whose interests seemed to cover everything from astrophysics to ancient languages. "We usually sit out here because the cafeteria is too loud for actual conversation," David explained as they settled onto the grass near the science building. Maya found herself relaxing for the first time since arriving at Jefferson High. These students weren't trying to extract information from her or impress her with their social connections. They were just eating lunch and talking about things they found interesting. David mentioned you're into science fiction, Sam said between bites of his sandwich. What kind of stuff do you read? Various authors, Maya replied, then caught herself using the same vague response she'd been giving everyone. Actually, I'm more interested in the technical aspects. How the science would actually work. Same, Alex said enthusiastically. I love stories that try to get the physics right. Have you ever thought about how artificial gravity would actually function on a spaceship? Maya had lived with artificial gravity systems for years, had watched them fail during combat damage and had learned to move efficiently in both rotating and linear acceleration environments. But she couldn't share that experience. I imagine it would be more complex than most fiction suggests, she said. Exactly. Rita jumped in. The energy requirements alone would be massive. Plus the engineering challenges of building rotating sections that could maintain structural integrity during acceleration. The conversation flowed naturally into technical discussions that Maya could participate in without revealing classified knowledge. These students thought about problems the way she'd been trained to think analytically, systematically, with attention to practical constraints. You know, Jordan said thoughtfully, you should consider joining Academic Bowl. We could use someone with your analytical skills. What's Academic Bowl? Maya asked. Competitive knowledge testing, David explained. Teams of students answer questions across multiple subjects: science, literature, history, current events. It's like warfare, but with information instead of weapons. Warfare with information. Maya almost smiled at the description. She'd fought several battles where intelligence and data analysis had been more important than firepower. When do you meet? She asked. Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, Sam replied. Same time as debate team, but less arguing and more problem solving. Maya considered the offer. Academic Bowl would give her a constructive outlet for her analytical skills while connecting her with students who appreciated competence over social positioning. I'd like to try it, she said. Awesome, Alex said. Fair warning though, we take it seriously. Mr. Harrison, the coach, is former military. He runs practice like tactical drills. Former military. Maya's interest sharpened. A teacher with military background might be someone who could understand her perspective without requiring detailed explanations. The rest of lunch passed pleasantly. Maya found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation, participating naturally without constantly monitoring her words for security breaches. When the bell rang, she felt disappointed rather than relieved. Same time tomorrow? David asked as they gathered their things. Absolutely, Maya replied, meaning it. Fifth period study hall was scheduled to be quiet work time, but Maya spent most of it thinking about Marcus's note. The message suggested he understood something about her situation, but it could also be a trap. Intelligence gathering sometimes involved creating false connections to encourage target subjects to reveal information. Maya decided to take the risk. If Marcus was genuinely offering understanding, she needed that more than she needed perfect operational security. If he was trying to extract information, she was trained to handle interrogation. After school, Maya made her way to the library. She found Marcus in a secluded corner, reading what appeared to be a technical manual rather than homework. You came, he said, looking up as she approached. You suggested you had experience with situations like mine, Maya replied, settling into the chair across from him. I'm curious what that means. Marcus closed the manual and leaned back in his chair. My father is Colonel James Marcus, Strategic Intelligence Division. He's been deployed for classified operations since I was 12. Maya absorbed this information. Colonel Marcus was a name she recognized. She'd worked with strategic intelligence several times during the war. If Marcus was his son, that explained his analytical skills and his ability to recognize signs of military background. That doesn't mean you understand my situation, Maya said carefully. No, Marcus agreed. But It means I understand what it's like to have experiences you can't share with your peers. It means I know what military families deal with when their children grow up around classified information and high-stakes operations. Military families. Maya hadn't considered that perspective before. She'd been so focused on her own unique situation that she'd overlooked the possibility that other students might have their own complicated relationships with the war and its aftermath. How do you handle it? She asked. Carefully, Marcus replied. I learned early that most people can't relate to certain experiences. So I find the ones who can, and I'm selective about what I share with everyone else. And, you think I have experiences that most people can't relate to? Marcus studied her face for a moment. I think you're someone who's been through things that would break most adults, let alone teenagers. I think you're trying very hard to seem normal when normal is something you've never really had the chance to be. Maya felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Marcus wasn't trying to extract specific information, he was offering recognition of her struggle. It's difficult, she admitted. Sitting in classes learning things I already know, having conversations about problems that seem trivial after. She stopped herself before revealing too much. After dealing with real consequences, Marcus finished. After making decisions that actually mattered. Yes. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Maya found herself thinking about the lunch conversation with David's group, about the academic bowl opportunity, about the possibility of finding her place in this strange new world. The people you were sitting with at lunch today, Marcus said eventually. They're good people. Smart, honest, not interested in drama or social politics. You know them? I eat with them sometimes when debate team gets too intense. David's group accepts people for who they are without requiring detailed backstories. Maya nodded, understanding the implication. Marcus was suggesting that David's lunch group might be a safer social environment than Jessica's investigation committee. What about Jessica and her friends? Maya asked. Marcus considered his answer carefully. They mean well, but they're used to being the ones who know everything about everyone. Having someone with genuine secrets in their orbit is challenging for them. They've been researching me, Maya said. I figured. It's what they do. Marcus leaned forward slightly. But they're also fundamentally decent people. If you asked them to stop digging, they would. Maya thought about Jessica's kindness the night before, about the way the group had ultimately decided to respect her privacy. Maybe Marcus was right about their fundamental decency. The note you gave me, Maya said. About not carrying stories alone. Everyone needs someone who understands, Marcus replied. It doesn't have to be someone who knows all the details. Just someone who recognizes that the details exist and matter. Maya looked at Marcus, really looked at him. He was offering her something she hadn't expected to find at Jefferson High, genuine understanding without judgment or demand for information. Thank you, she said quietly. No problem. And, Maya? The academic bowl team really could use someone with your kind of analytical background. Mr. Harrison is good at recognizing talent and not asking too many questions about where it came from. Maya nodded, making her decision. Academic bowl would give her a constructive outlet, a team environment, and a teacher who might understand military mindset without requiring explanations. As they left the library together, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since returning to civilian life, hope that she might actually be able to build a meaningful existence in this new world. The walk home took the same 11 minutes and 43 seconds as always, but Maya's perspective had shifted. Jefferson High was still a complex environment requiring careful navigation, but it wasn't entirely hostile territory. She'd found potential allies, identified safe social spaces, and discovered opportunities to use her skills constructively. At dinner, when her parents asked about her day, Maya had actual positive things to report. She'd met some interesting students who shared her academic interests. She was considering joining Academic Bowl. She was beginning to find her place. What she didn't mention was that finding her place required acknowledging that she would never be a normal teenager. Her experiences had shaped her in ways that couldn't be undone, and trying to pretend otherwise was exhausting and counterproductive. Instead, she was learning to find people who could accept her unusual perspectives without demanding explanations. People who valued competence and intelligence over conformity. People who understood that some stories couldn't be told, but that didn't make the people carrying them any less worthy of friendship and acceptance. Later that evening, Maya sat at her desk working through the advanced physics problems Dr. Kim had given her. The equations brought back memories of real applications, calculating jump coordinates, predicting orbital mechanics, designing propulsion systems. But, for the first time since returning to civilian life, those memories didn't feel entirely painful. Maybe her experiences could serve a different purpose now. Maybe the skills that had made her an effective military commander could help her become an effective student, teammate, and friend. Maya's tablet chimed with messages from the lunch crew group chat. Jessica was organizing a study session for Friday's chemistry test. David was sharing an article about recent developments in space technology. Marcus had sent a private message with information about academic bowl practice times. For the first time since her return to civilian life, Maya felt like she was building something rather than just surviving something. The battles weren't over, she still faced daily challenges of identity management and social navigation. But she was no longer fighting those battles alone. Tomorrow would bring new tests of her ability to balance honesty with security, authenticity with operational necessity. But tonight, Maya Chen, former ship's captain, tactical prodigy, and 17-year-old high school student, felt something approaching peace. Maya's first academic bowl practice was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after her arrival at Jefferson High. She'd spent the intervening time carefully building her civilian identity, participating in classes, eating lunch with David's group, and gradually becoming just another face in the crowded hallways. But, as she stood outside Mr. Harrison's classroom at 3:30 p.m., Maya felt the familiar pre-mission tension that had preceded every military operation. Academic bowl might be safer than space combat, but it was still a test of her abilities under pressure. "You made it," David said, appearing beside her with his usual friendly smile. "Ready to meet the coach?" Maya nodded, though ready felt like an overstatement. She'd researched academic bowl competitions online, studying question formats and scoring systems with the same thoroughness she'd once applied to enemy tactical analysis. The intellectual challenge was appealing, but working with a former military instructor introduced variables she couldn't predict. The classroom door opened, and Mr. Harrison emerged. He was exactly what Maya had expected from Alex's description: tall, lean, with the straight posture and economical movements that marked career military personnel. His eyes swept over the assembled students with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. "Gentlemen. Ladies." His voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. "Let's get started." Inside the classroom, 12 students were arranged around a large conference table. Maya recognized David, Alex, Sam, and Rita from their lunch group. The others were unfamiliar but had the focused, analytical look of serious academic competitors. "Before we begin today's practice round, Mr. Harrison said, I want to introduce our newest team member. Maya Chen joins us as a senior transfer student with strong analytical capabilities." Maya felt the weight of examination from her new teammates. Unlike the social curiosity she'd encountered in regular classes, this attention felt professional, people evaluating her potential contribution to their collective success. "Maya," Mr. Harrison continued, "academic bowl requires quick thinking, broad knowledge, and the ability to perform under pressure. Think of it as tactical operations using information instead of firepower." The military metaphor wasn't accidental, Maya realized. Mr. Harrison was signaling that he understood certain types of background without requiring explicit discussion. "Today we'll run a standard practice round," he explained. 4-person teams, 20 questions covering science, literature, history, and current events. "Maya, you'll observe this round to get familiar with our format." Maya took a seat in the back corner, automatically positioning herself to observe the entire room while maintaining clear sightlines to both exits. Old habits, but they also gave her an excellent vantage point to study team dynamics. The practice round began with a question about molecular biology. Sam buzzed in immediately with the correct answer, earning his team 10 points. The pace was roppy.